Are the Jets and Eagles too aggressive when it comes to discussing their coaching staff? We're going to discuss that question. We're going to debate a lot more here on Football with Faria in just a little bit. Also, have some nice, interesting tidbits. Is Aaron Rodgers, does he have a high football IQ? We're going to get to all that in a minute. But first, let's get it rolling on Football with Faria.
It's time for Football with Faria.
You got to get the offense right, and you got to be able to be aggressive. They put up 14 against the secondary. That is driving me up a freaking wall right now.
Now here's your host, Nick Faria.
All right. Thank you guys for jumping on. For those of you watching, for those of you listening in, thank you. You guys have any comments, questions, feel free to ask. The link down below will allow you to call in on YouTube. Also sent that one out on Twitter, X, whatever the heck you want to call it. But a lot to talk about today when it comes to the NFL. You normally think that a measly Wednesday preparing for the divisional round doesn't have a lot of conversations, not a lot to talk about. But there's plenty of rumors going around in terms of this coaching carousel, what happens in Philadelphia, what happens to Bill Belichick, a lot of different rumblings, a lot of different stuff going on. And what does that mean for the Jets? They're not going to make a move, but what does it mean for them? Are they right to not make a move? Is it a good sign that they aren't altering their coaching staff going into 2024? We're going to get to all that in a little bit. But first, we do have to talk about this coaching carousel, because let me tell you, it is crazy out there right now. I have several people telling me that Bill Belichick wants to join the Philadelphia Eagles. He wants to join. The report out there is that he wants a talented team that underachieved last year, and Philadelphia is certainly one of them. Atlanta is certainly one of them. The Chargers, the Cowboys, all those teams are on that list. You could certainly put the Jets in that conversation, but they're not changing their head coaching staff. And we've argued with that before, right, guys? We've argued about the positives and negatives of keeping Robert Saleh and his staff. But it seems that there are several rumors out there going around. First off is that the Commanders, they want Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator from Detroit. They're putting out a full court press for him, as is Carolina. And, of course, good reason to do that, right? You look at what the Lions have done this year, the last couple of years, with Jared Goff as their quarterback, and a lot of great stuff has happened. So he absolutely is deserving of a head coaching cycle. And he's going to be one of, if not the most coveted person out there to be a head coach. And quite frankly, if you were the New York Jets and you were looking for a head coach this offseason, he should be at the top of your list, as Robert Saleh was 3 years ago. People kind of forget. We get on Robert Saleh for the lack of results. And, they should have never have made that hire in the first place and all that different stuff. But I think what's lost there is that Robert Saleh was the top guy in the coaching cycle. What was it, 2021, 2020? 3 years ago, so 2021. He was the top guy. He was the architect of the dominant 49ers defense. His energy, his locker room presence, everyone loved him. So to sit here and say that Robert Saleh was the wrong hire, as some are doing, but not a lot. So I'm proud of you guys for understanding that. But he was the top guy. And the Jets had a slam dunk hire in that process when that first came out. But it's the same thing with Ben Johnson here. It's the same thing with Slowick from Houston. Houston's offensive coordinator, and I would argue he's got a better overall resume, Slowick does, than Ben Johnson. Because as good as Ben Johnson has done the last couple of years in Detroit, Slowick's worked in San Francisco. He's worked in Seattle. Now in Houston. When you get Geno Smith and C.J. Stroud and Jimmy Garoppolo all looking very good and having very good numbers, that's a testament to you as an offensive play caller. And if a team like Philadelphia is going to fire Nick Sirianni, and we'll get to that discussion in a little bit, but Slowik's the top guy on this list, and I think he should be, based on everything that has happened, based on everything he's doing. I thought the Cleveland Browns were going to win that playoff game in Houston. I didn't pick them to win. And they didn't just win, they blew them out. The Texans blew out the Browns. And it wasn't just C.J. Stroud either. Singletary had a big game. Houston's running game was very strong. They dominated one of the best defenses in football this year. They weren't the only ones. The Packers did an excellent job against the Cowboys. You know, the multiple really good defenses in the wild card round got blasted to the nth degree. But the one thing I will always say, as Jet fans are learning now, just because you feel you have the right hire and everyone says you knocked it out of the park, doesn't always mean that's the case. And I do like Robert Saleh. I do think he can be a good coach once he grows and finally gets a quarterback and has some health along his roster. But his hiring doesn't look like the best hiring in that cycle. Ironically enough, the two worst hires, the two guys that were just blasted for their hiring cycle, saying that there were other more worthy candidates, are the two guys that are left that have made the playoffs this year. And that's Nick Sirianni and Dan Campbell. And we can argue about Sirianni being a good coach or not, but you can't look past the results. Since he's been the head coach of the Eagles, 3 straight winning seasons, a Super Bowl appearance. We talk about how bad the wild card game was, but he's been to the playoffs 3 straight years. All Jets fans have told me this entire year is just make the playoffs. All he should do, all the requirement is make the playoffs. That's what Sirianni did. Based on that premise, Sirianni's been excellent. And obviously, it has not been the case. Because there are some deficiencies that he has. There's some deficiencies that Dan Campbell has. When we talk about that coaching cycle with Robert Saleh in there, the 2 worst hires that were graded out were Campbell and Sirianni. And Saleh was at the top. And Brandon Staley was at the top. And Brandon Staley is gone after 1 playoff appearance. Nick Sirianni might be gone after 3. But just because a move is perceived as good, is perceived as something that fans want, doesn't mean it's always going to work out. And that's why there are teams now taking their time and doing their due diligence. The Titans have been very quiet with their head coaching search. The Chargers are all in on one guy. And I love Jim Harbaugh. He's a great coach. But there's no guarantee that he's going to be able to succeed right away. Chargers have a lot of problems on their hands. There's no guarantee that that's going to be an automatic switch. No guarantee. Raiders, we think, is going to be Antonio Pierce. The Seahawks are going to be quiet. A lot of people think Dan Quinn. Some people think Canales from Tampa. But I look at this, and I look at where everything is now and where everything could be in a couple of years. And it's too early to say teams knock it out of the park. That's why I say give it a breather. Everyone ragged on Sirianni for his opening press conference, and it was one of the worst press conferences I've ever seen. And that year, he finished 9-8. He was the only rookie coach to go to the playoffs. The next year, he was in the Super Bowl. You can't bypass the records for one and not the other. And Eagle fans don't like the fact that I'm propping Sirianni up. And Jets fans think that Robert Saleh isn't good enough. But again, I'm not here to give you the extremes. I'm here to give you the facts. Sometimes patience is a virtue. Sometimes it doesn't work, but that is the essence of life. So, you have a plan and it just doesn't work out. But this coaching carousel is going to get very interesting very quickly, because if the Texans are eliminated this weekend, then Slowik's going to be available. If the Lions are eliminated, then Ben Johnson's going to be available. And then you have 3 coaches who are at the top of their game still, and Pete Carroll, Bill Belichick, and Mike Vrabel, who have been very quiet in this process. We haven't heard a lot of interviews from Mike Vrabel just yet. It's been very quiet on the Vrabel front, which leads me to believe that maybe this is going to be a year where he goes back to being a defensive coordinator. Could very well be the case. Could very well be the case. But in terms of breaking news and stuff that's happened, the biggest news today comes out of the Eagles locker room cleanout. And this is why I wanted to bring up Sirianni. And I do want to compare this to the Jets and Robert Saleh, because I feel it's almost identical in terms of where the fan bases are with their coaching staff. Because Jet fans want a brand new staff in general. They want a brand new staff. They feel the 3 years has not been good enough, and there needs to be change. The Eagles had one of the worst collapses in modern history, and everyone in the fan base wants Nick Sirianni out to be replaced by someone who knows what they're doing. But the one constant theme that you're seeing, both in the Eagles locker room and in the Jets locker room, what's the one constant? The players are adamantly defending the coaching staff. Adamantly defending. Fletcher Cox today, a veteran, could be back. He's going to be a free agent this year in the offseason, but he could be back in Philadelphia. He was adamant that Nick Sirianni should not be fired, because you don't fire a coach, as he said, who's been to the playoffs in 3 straight years. Same thing with Jason Kelce. Hassan Reddick, after the Tampa Bay game, defended Nick Sirianni. All these players, the only one that really didn't have a massive defense is Jalen Hurts. But even then, I argued on the show yesterday, and I'll argue on the show today. Jalen Hurts defended Sirianni. He just didn't defend it the way everyone wants him to defend it. People want definitive answers when you're the quarterback and all these other stuff. But Jalen Hurts has spoken in riddles since he got to Philadelphia. Since he got there. There's no difference. Him saying, I didn't believe Nick Sirianni was going anywhere, is not an omission of, I don't want him to be here. It's an omission of, why would he go? Why would he go elsewhere? He's our head coach. People will look in and hear what they want to hear. And the interesting thing that I had, and I've seen this all day on Eagles Twitter. I've seen it all day. And it's just, I have to laugh. I have heard people say, well, Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox defending Nick Sirianni, it just doesn't matter, and I don't care, because they may not even be on the team next year. Or my favorite, I don't care unless they have something bad to say, which is very common if you look on Eagles Twitter right now. Very common. And when I hear that and when I see that, it's clear that the basis and understanding of what makes a good coach is completely out the window, especially in the modern NFL. There's not a fan out there that knows what it takes to win a championship. I don't think there's more media members that know what it takes to win a championship. And we are just blindly angry at everything. Everything. But when you have leaders like Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce and Hassan Reddick and Jordan Davis all saying that they love Nick Sirianni, that they want Nick Sirianni to stay, it's ridiculous that they're having this conversation. It's not a measure to say, oh, that opinion doesn't matter. Talk to me if one of them says something bad. Because what you're telling me is, what you're telling everyone is, I don't care what any player says unless it's something that I agree with. And quite frankly, if someone has that opinion, they're not to be taken seriously. Because who are you as a fan to say you know anything that goes on in the locker room? And I talked about this about Robert Saleh all the time, Jet fans. You guys have gotten angry with me when I've said this. A head coach doesn't have to call plays. He doesn't. You look at a lot of teams in the NFL, a lot of successful teams in the NFL, their head coach doesn't call plays. Andy Reid, for 3 years, didn't call plays. They were still successful because Andy Reid is a locker room anchor. Because the locker room is behind him. They're motivated by him. And if that's what Nick Sirianni is, then that's what Nick Sirianni is. And people will say, well, it doesn't make sense because the team came out flat and lifeless in a playoff game. And that's all fair. Because the words are one thing, the results are the other. And the results have been very, very bad for Philadelphia. But the one thing I'll say is, was it the results on the field or was it the coaching? Because the one constant that we've heard for many, many years is that general manager Howie Roseman and owner Jeffrey Lurie like this team to be run in a collaborative approach. Nick Sirianni may not have been the one to hire Matt Patricia. He may not have been the one to decide who is going to replace Sean Desai in the middle of the year. And this isn't to say that Howie Roseman should be fired. Under no circumstances, anyone telling you that Howie Roseman should be fired doesn't understand football, doesn't care to understand football, and their opinion should be thrown out in the trash. Lifeless, mindless fools. But Howie Roseman has done this before. It's an objective fact. So if Nick Sirianni brings in a new defensive coordinator that is light years better than Patricia and Desai, and brings in a new offensive coordinator or a new pass game coordinator and says, we're going to grow and change this offense the way it needs to be changed. What does that tell you? It tells you the coach is willing to change. And he should get another year. And by all accounts, it seems that that is part of the consideration. I know we met with Jeffrey Lurie today, and part of that plan is going to be determined if Sirianni stays or not. But you look at where this team is, 11-6, a blowout in the playoff game. They're still having much of their core under contract. They have a lot of their core under contract. And it's hard for me to say that this team isn't going to be good next year because the schedule is going to be a little lighter. I think the offense is going to look a lot better with Brian Johnson having a full year under his belt as a play caller. Their defense is going to be a lot better, particularly from the end of the year. All that's going to be taken into account. And again, the one thing I look at, locker room cleanout. Everyone wants to say the player's opinion doesn't matter after the season because they didn't give enough effort. It's one of the other guys. It is coaching. Coaching was the problem this year. But the one difference that I have with everybody else, everyone wants to jump to the immediate extreme of, okay, coaching was the problem, everyone must be fired. But in reality, I say, no, there needs to be changes, not a full fire sale, as some are suggesting. And I think that's wrong. But let's say, again, Football with Faria, we're on our 21st, 22nd minute of the program today. You guys have a question, a comment, concern, anything, let me know. Call in if you need. But the one thing, let's play devil's advocate, shall we? Let's play devil's advocate. And we'll bring the Jets fans back into this kind of conversation. But let's say Philadelphia fires Nick Sirianni and just completely wipes the floor with all their coaching staff. Everyone's gone. Brian Johnson, Jeff Stoutland, everybody. Everybody. What's to say that's the right idea? What's to say the Jets should be as aggressive as Philadelphia? And the one thing that I'll say about this that I think needs to be talked about is that sometimes the best move you make is the one you don't. Think about that. As a general manager, that rings true. Perfect example was 2015. Marcus Mariota was coming out of the NFL draft. Chip Kelly was willing to trade 5 first-round picks, a young Fletcher Cox, and 2 other players for the number 2 overall pick. And Tennessee said no. And everyone saw Chip Kelly doing that, and Chip Kelly saw that as, I can't believe we missed it. We missed out on the quarterback that I wanted. But we look back at it now, and that's the best thing that could happen to the franchise. Philadelphia and the Jets themselves have had situations where they were about to make a move. They could make a move, and they didn't. And it turned out to be the best thing for them. The best moves sometimes are the ones you don't make, and the ones that you do on a tone of aggression and frustration usually blows up in your face. So let's say, and this is, I want Jet fans here to pay attention to this. Let's say the Eagles fire Nick Sirianni with the context added of a coach that has been to the playoffs every year he's been at the helm. Every year. 3 years in, 3 playoff appearances. And they fire him. What's to say, and who's to say that they're going to get the top candidate this year? After coaches see that just making the playoffs could get you fired in this city. In the end, they will lose out on a lot of really good offensive coaches that preach patience, that want growth, but won't get it. That's why a lot of people don't choose Philly in the first place. Remember, people kind of forget when Sirianni was hired, the job was between him and Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels. Thank God Philadelphia didn't go that route, right? So for the Jets, would you rather be the team that is firing coaches every 3 years, even if you're good? And we can argue about if Philadelphia was good this year or not. They went 11-6. Okay? They had a horrific downslide. A horrific downslide. There's still a lot of talent on that team, though. But would you be the team? Would you want to be that franchise that gives up after 3 years of a coaching staff because they don't win a championship and they have one bad year? I wouldn't. I don't want the team to be like that. Stability is something that's important. And this is why I commend the Jets and I commend Woody Johnson for saying we're going to stay the path for 2024 with Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas. And we can argue about this. We can debate this. But think about it next year. Let's say, devil's advocate, let's say the Jets go in to 2024 and miss the playoffs again. Robert Saleh gets fired. Joe Douglas gets fired. And it's a clean slate with a lot of talent on the roster. Do you think the Jets can get the top coaching candidate that year, as opposed to a team like Philadelphia that has shown a propensity to give up early? What coaches will see in that situation is a team that is very structurally sound in their organization, but are very quick to pull the flag out. And a team that maybe needs some direction, but is patient with what people want and the direction that people want. That's a fundamental difference. It's a big difference. So for the Jet fans that want Philadelphia and they look at these situations in Dallas and Philly and say, I can't believe they are playoff contending teams and they're firing their head coach and the Jets just won't move off of Robert Saleh. But the difference there is that that's not the place you want to be. You don't want to be in that situation where you are firing a coach after making the playoffs. Because usually that's a sign of instability. A sign of a lack of direction from the front office. You don't want to be like that. You know what? Quite frankly, I know Jet fans will trade the talent and the success that they've had, but I can guarantee you don't want to be in the situation where you are looking at a head coaching position because the one you had, you just fired for making the playoffs and having a terrible end to the season. Think about that difference, guys. I'm serious. Jets fans are going to compare all the time the fact that Robert Saleh is still here, and the fact that Keith Carter is still here, and the fact that Joe Douglas is still here, Nathaniel Hackett, Todd Downing. But sometimes that's the right move to show the league that you are willing to be patient with your staff to get to that point. Think about that. Think about that difference. Next season, if it doesn't work out and you blow it up, you can get the top candidate because you were patient enough and willing to give Saleh a fair amount of time to do it. Give Saleh a fair amount to say, listen, we gave you an opportunity with Aaron Rodgers. The first year didn't work out because of injuries. Well, you had him this second year. We gave you that opportunity to stay with him, and it just didn't work out. I'm not going to blame Woody Johnson if the Jets miss the playoffs this year in 2024 and he fires everybody, because there's nothing to argue about that. There's nothing to argue. They were given 4 years. And I always believe for a coach, you need 4 years to see how good he can be. Because you need to allow him to develop, to learn, to make mistakes, and grow from them. The Jets were a rebuilding team when Robert Saleh got there. And yes, the length of their rebuild has gone a lot slower as opposed to Detroit and Houston and all those other teams. But who's to say that the Texans are going to be competitive next year? Who's to say? What if CJ Stroud has a sophomore slump and they miss the playoffs? The South is going to be hard to compete against. The Colts are going to be better. The Jaguars are going to be better. There's no guarantee that the Texans win and dominate the division. Things change in the NFL so quickly. And that's where patience has to come in. That's where stability has to come in. You don't want to be the Cardinals of the world who are firing coaches after a single season. Or the Eagles that seem ready to fire everyone after 3 years and one bad season. They were pushing Nick Sirianni out the door his first year because they started 2-5. 2-5, and they were willing to shove him out the door a year after going 4-11-1. Think about that. People thought that Sirianni was over his head his first year, and they think he's over his head in his third year. But the one thing that I will always say in that argument is, well, look, Philadelphia was patient with him, and the second year, they got to the Super Bowl. They didn't lose that Super Bowl because of Nick Sirianni. What happens in year 4? The schedule is going to be a little lighter. You're going to have to go through the AFC North. I think they have the NFC South. But you're going to be competitive again, and you're going to be a top team in the NFC again. You have cap space. You have the draft picks. They have 3 picks in the top 60. There's plenty of room for them to improve. So if the Eagles were to get rid of Nick Sirianni, that's more of an indictment on the stability and lack of stability on that roster, in that front office. First sign of trouble, get rid of everybody. That's not something that you want, Jets fans. It's not something you want. Crazy as it sounds, not the case. Not the case at all. From J-Dubs, quick comment. A lot is being made of Keith Carter, and I'm already tired of it. And yeah, I get it. There are some things that I will look at and say the Jets should make wholesale changes to. And I thought offensive line would be one of them. I still think offensive line should be one of them. Because I get it. I understand it. You have to make some changes. And the point of Nick Sirianni staying in Philadelphia is the belief that he is going to change something. Whether it be bringing in a new defensive coordinator, whether it be bringing in a new play caller or a new pass game coordinator or a legitimate offensive mind to help out with the game plan. All those things are going to be taken into account. All those things. But like Philadelphia, do you want to be the guy, you want to be the team that is getting rid of everyone after a year? That's not really an enticing spot to be in. Going in for a coaching candidate, is it? The Jets are doing the right thing here. And I've been saying this now for a very long time. They're doing the right thing here. Because the alternative of keeping Robert Saleh with Aaron Rodgers is alienating a Hall of Fame quarterback and bringing in a new coach and having this whole thing start up again. Another example, look at the New York Giants. Look at the Giants. The Giants front office has done damage control now because the reports out there, and we talked about it on Monday, the reports out there about Brian Daboll being difficult to work with and really being hard on his assistants. Do we think that he's going to get a top candidate as his defensive coordinator this year? Could be. He could. But he may not. He may not. And that's the problem. I would rather have a team that is patient than a team that is overreacting to everything. Philadelphia is known to overreact. All they've done this year is overreact. The winning wasn't good enough, so they overreacted to the other side. The losing was horrific, and they didn't know what to do. So they overreacted to the losing. You don't want to be an overreacting team because it blows up in your face, as it did for Philadelphia, as it did for Dallas, as it did for Miami. There's a lot of things that went wrong for the Jets this year. One of them is not the fact that they allowed Robert Saleh to return. And I truly believe that. I truly, truly believe it. We can argue all we want about if he is the right guy for the job and all the mistakes that he has made in the 3 years that he's been here. But you don't want to be on the other side that gives up on him before Aaron Rodgers actually plays in a full game. If he fails in 2024, it's a different story. But Woody Johnson will be able to go to the table, go into these interview rooms and say, we gave Robert Saleh all the time he needed, and he couldn't get the job done. A fundamental difference in this conversation. It's a fundamental difference between what Jeffrey Lurie does and is trying to do than what Woody Johnson has done with Robert Saleh. He has essentially, Woody Johnson, given Robert Saleh a playoff mandate in 2024. We don't know if Nick Sirianni is going to be even given that chance next year. We don't know. Because if he fires him, there's no mandate. How do you have a playoff mandate for a rookie coach? That's setting themselves up for failure. And again, it's the endless circle of Philadelphia where everything is not good enough because we got to the Super Bowl that 1 year. It's the endless cycle of misery where no one can be happy. Jet fans, you don't want to be like that. You don't want to be in a situation where you are angry for making the playoffs. And it's the one thing that I'll always say. I just don't get, I'll never be able to understand the teams that fire their coaches too early. Because I truly, truly believe if you are really serious about building a winner, chemistry, stability, camaraderie, all of that is important. We see it. We see evidence of it with every champion. Every championship team, we see stability, being a focal reason why. The biggest reason why to some. So when I look at where the Eagles are and where the Jets are, I see a lot of similarities. Ultra talented teams, ultra talented everywhere. Philadelphia has a Pro Bowl corner in Darius Slay. Some excellent defensive linemen, excellent offensive linemen, excellent receivers, great running back, great quarterback, a great tight end. The Jets have an elite secondary, elite linebackers, elite defensive ends. They've got great receivers and runners and a quarterback. There's some things both teams have to fix on the roster. For the Eagles, it's the linebackers and safeties. For the Jets, it's the offensive line. But the difference between these two teams right now is one is being very, very patient, and the other is waiting and potentially ready to blow the whole thing up. Which side do you want to be on? No contest for me. No contest for me. It's not even close. It's not even close because stability matters. And that's the point. That is why, Jet fans, as angry as you are, relax. Relax. It's not as bad. It's not as bad as you think because guess what? It very well could be a lot worse. Very well could be a lot worse. I do want to end today's show with one comment made today by someone that I truly idolize in the sports media world. His name's Colin Cowherd. And people will get angry with me that I even idolize him in the first place, but I truly believe in terms of radio and radio shows, there's no one that does it better than Colin Cowherd. No one does it better. The understanding of inflection, the changes, everything that goes on, he is incredible at his craft. There are things that he says that are very, 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 very stupid. And he might have taken the cake with this one today. Because he said Aaron Rodgers was a low IQ quarterback. Sit, marinate. Aaron Rodgers, 4-time NFL MVP, is a low IQ quarterback. We sure we're talking about the right one? Sure we're talking about the right Aaron Rodgers? Not some guy, just random dude sitting in a farm in like North Dakota? Aaron's a common name. Rodgers is a common name. So be it. Maybe you got him confused. I it blew my mind when I heard it. Absolutely blew my mind. Interested to hear what you guys think. It's part of where we are in sports media because everyone wants the reaction. Everyone wants the clicks, the excitement of, oh, look at what he said. Look at Stephen A. Smith yelling at Mad Dog because Mad Dog didn't have X team on his top 5. And as I continue to grow this channel, I will promise you, every take I have will be based on something that I have heard, based on things that I have seen, and based on historical context that is added to these discussions. I'm not going to be just throwing out there that Aaron Rodgers is a low IQ guy because that's just ridiculous. First off, he might be the most cerebral quarterback in the NFL today. He just might be. He's certainly the oldest. With age comes wisdom. To think otherwise is moronic. Moronic. What are we doing here? It blew my mind when I heard it because when you talk about low IQ players, you see low IQ players on the football field every game. A player makes a mistake that you look at and say, what is he doing? A prime example. Prime example. I don't have the highlight on me, but Avonte Maddox in the wild card game. Safety for Philadelphia comes crashing down to go on the opposite side of the field, and instead of going in a different direction, he runs into his own defender, and it's a wide open touchdown for Tampa Bay. An Eagles defensive player tackled his teammate on a pass play that resulted in a touchdown. That is a low IQ play. You look at any highlight of Aaron Rodgers, what tells you he's a low IQ player? What it is people don't like him because of what he thinks, because of what he says, because some of the stuff is outlandish. Some of the stuff is very political that a lot of people don't agree with. That's where the anger for Aaron Rodgers comes from. We have so many quarterbacks, so many great quarterbacks that are drawing the anger of people for a lot of different reasons. For Patrick Mahomes, it's because he cries so much on the field and complains for calls. For Josh Allen, it's that he turns the ball over and is a loose cannon. For Jalen Hurts, it's that he can't read defenses. I don't know why that's the argument, but whatever. For Aaron Rodgers, the anger for him is he's a political person, a very political person, and he thinks a lot differently than a lot of people. And some of it's crazy. Some of it's crazy. Some of it's out there. Some of it, what we can argue going back and forth. But I sit there and say, is your anger with Aaron Rodgers about him on the field, or is it his beliefs off it? And if it's because of his beliefs off it, if your argument against why Aaron Rodgers is a bad dude and a bad quarterback because he lied about his COVID vaccination, this isn't a football conversation. And you don't hate him because of football. You hate him because of stuff he's done off the field. And then it's a completely different argument. Because we're not arguing about football. We're arguing about something else. So when I hear something like that about Colin Cowherd saying Aaron Rodgers is a low IQ quarterback, that's not him saying he's a low IQ quarterback. That's him saying he doesn't like what he does. And that's a fundamental difference. A fundamental difference. So that's going to be the end for today's show. I got to cook dinner for my wife who's coming up very quickly. We got to make sure that everything's closed up. So for those that were listening, stay tuned for tomorrow. We'll break down some of the free agent targets for the Jets. I see J-Dubs asking about it. We'll get to that question tomorrow. Where do the Jets go in free agency? What happens to Nick Sirianni? We're going to continue to update this. It's Nick Sirianni watch because Philadelphia can't stop talking about it. So for all of you here watching, thank you guys so much. We'll see you guys tomorrow evening once again on Football with Faria.